Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs.
Je m'appelle le lieutenant-général Mike Rouleau et je commande le commandement des opérations interarmées du Canada. Ce qui signifie que lorsque le chef d'état-major de la Défense ordonne que les forces militaires soient employées au pays ou à l'étranger, à quelques exceptions près, il m'appartient de m'acquitter de ces fonctions. Je suis accompagné sur la scène par 2 officiers qui servent en tant que commandant de la composante aérienne, le major général Alain Pelletier à ma droite, et le commandant de ma composante maritime, le contre-amiral Craig Baines, à ma gauche. Tout d'abord, permettez-moi de m'exprimer mes plus sincères condoléances à la famille, aux amis et aux proches de nos membres décédés et ceux qui sont toujours portés disparus. Il n'y a pas de mots pour décrire une perte aussi tragique que celui-ci, et nous sommes avec eux. On behalf of the Armed Forces, I would just like to reiterate our condolences to the families of the crew of Stalker 2-2 who lost their lives or are missing. Given Sunday's Snowbirds crash, I offer my sincere condolences as well to the family of Captain Jen Casey, and we wish Captain Rich McDougall a good recovery. I would emphasize that we are here today to discuss the search and recovery operation in the aftermath of the April 29th crash of our Stalker 2-2 call sign, which was conducting maritime flying and surveillance operations from Her Majesty's Canadian ship Fredericton, who itself was operating as a warship in standing NATO Maritime Group 2. The Maritime and Air Component Commanders here with me will amplify slightly on that context. At this point, I will raise an important caveat. The 3 of us command and oversee operations. We are not here to speak to any institutional Air Force or Navy matters, which are the purview of Lieutenant General Al Meinzinger, the Commander of the Royal Canadian Air Force, and Vice Admiral Art MacDonald, the Commander of the Royal Canadian Navy. Nous comprenons qu'il y a beaucoup de questions autour de l'accident et de la spéculation a commencé dans les médias. Je voudrais faire quelques commentaires suivants à cet égard. Comme l'a indiqué le chef d'état-major de la Défense le 7 de mai, une enquête du directeur de la sécurité des vols sur incidents aériens est en cours. Le major général Pelletier vous expliquera ce processus, mais l'argument du général Vance demeure en vigueur. Out of respect for the families, for Captain Brendan Ian MacDonald, Captain Kevin Hagan, Captain Maxime Miron-Morin, Sub-Lieutenant Abigail Cobra, Sub-Lieutenant Matthew Pike, and Master Corporal Matthew Cousins, we will not do half measures and seek partial information until the proper authorities are satisfied that we have unpacked what occurred on the 29th of April. Moreover, as a professional organization, we need to know what occurred to inform our operations, our capabilities, morale, and confidence. What I will offer is the following. Military operations carry inherent risk, and it is impossible for us to mitigate those risks to zero in what we do either in training or operations. We are a learning organization, and if there are things we need to adjust, we will. This is how we grow as an organization. As the force employer, the work I have seen by our sailors and aviators in my 2 years as the commander of Joint Operations Command has been exemplary. The young women and men who fly and sail out there do so in an extremely professional manner, often in very challenging environments. They are very skilled at what they do. Beyond the flight safety investigation, there are 2 additional administrative investigations being conducted. The first is a summary investigation. Its purpose is to ascertain the status of the unrecovered crew for the purposes of family estate planning. This summary investigation began on the 8th of May and will deliver its findings to me within 60 days, which I will then forward to the Chief of the Defense Staff. The second investigation is the Board of Inquiry. A Board of Inquiry is an internal, non-judicial, fact-finding investigation aimed at examining and reporting the circumstances of the incident. Findings will be made as to the causal factors of the accident and compliance with aspects like maintenance and other matters. This investigation will take longer than the summary investigation, and we as an institution recognize the criticality of this Board of Inquiry to both our work as a military and of course to the families of our fallen. The board is being assembled now, and I expect to sign the convening order later this week and will forward in due course the findings and recommendations of the Board of Inquiry to the Chief of the Defense Staff. Now to the matter of the search and recovery operation. The decision was made very quickly following the incident that we would attempt to find and recover both our fallen and the machine, to bring both our shipmates and aircrew home, and to maximize the chances to fully understand what happened. After rapidly assessing the parameters of the crash site at over 3,000 meters in depth, and in speaking to experts, we determined that the most rapid response capability was resident in the U.S. Navy. The Canadian Armed Forces does not possess capabilities of this nature. Speed in this search and recovery is very important for a number of reasons. The first is for the families. The second relates to our CAF ethos. We do not leave our fallen behind. And the third reason is because the environment will degrade evidence over time. I can tell you that we dispatched a team of experts within 48 hours of the incident and secured U.S. Navy support for this operation within 9 days. As of the 15th of May, Canadian Armed Forces aircraft have begun transporting U.S. experts from the continental United States, along with deep submersible technologies, to Greece to prepare for the search and hopefully the recovery of as many of our fallen and as much of the machine as possible. It is important to note that we will remain at the site until we are satisfied that we have collected all that we can. There are no constraints in terms of time or cost that are limiting our ability to do this. Rear Admiral Baines will speak to the search and recovery in a little more detail, but I will close in stating that the Canadian Armed Forces is in charge of this mission. Yes, we are being enabled by the United States Navy, but there is an unbroken Canadian chain of command that exists between the vessel that will be over the crash site, my headquarters, all the way to the Chief of the Defense Staff. The Fredericton is en route to join the standing NATO Maritime Group 1, and we are postured to send a replacement helicopter to her. But we will only initiate this once we understand the circumstances around the operational pause and when we can synchronize the transfer of that helicopter with permission being allowed to fly again. I want to reiterate that in the immediate aftermath of the crash, we recovered some debris and significantly Sub-Lieutenant Cobra. As you know, we brought Abigail home on the 6th of May. We also identified the partial remains of Captain MacDonald on the 9th of May. It is our fervent hope that this mission will see us bring others home as well. It is why CAF, and indeed Canadians, are undertaking this complicated mission. Thank you. Alain.
Merci, Général. Thank you. Au nom de tous les membres de l'Aviation royale canadienne, je veux offrir mes sincères condoléances aux familles, aux amis et aux collègues de l'équipage de Stalker 22 et de la capitaine Casey, l'officier d'affaires publiques des Snowbirds. Nous continuons à ressentir profondément leur perte et nous sommes déterminés à faire tout en notre possible pour nous assurer de comprendre exactement ce qui s'est produit et pourquoi, afin que nous puissions poursuivre nos opérations et ce, tout en honorant leur mémoire. Nous offrons aussi nos vœux de prompt rétablissement au capitaine McDougall, Snowbirds 11. Les enquêtes ne sont pas des processus rapides, mais il est essentiel de prendre le temps nécessaire pour examiner tous les éléments qui ont causé ces accidents afin d'obtenir des réponses claires. Nous sommes résolus à bien faire les choses. On April 29, Stalker 22 was returning from a training mission over the Ionian Sea when it crashed into the water. The helicopter had flown by the ship and was repositioning to approach the ship from the rear in order to conduct deck hoist training prior to landing back on HMCS Fredericton. Following the crash, a 7-person flight safety investigation team was quickly dispatched and arrived in Toronto, Italy on May 2nd to begin their investigation. The data modules for the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorders were brought back to Canada for analysis by the National Research Council and the aircraft manufacturer. We are very grateful for their support. The investigative team continues to sort through and analyze the information at this time. There are no further updates at this stage of the investigation. In the coming weeks, the RCAF Directorate of Flight Safety is expected to issue its From the Investigator report that will outline focus area for the continuing investigation and will inform our decision regarding the fleet. Immediately following the accident, I ordered an operational pause on the CH-148 Cyclone fleet in my capacity as the Operational Airworthiness Authority of the Royal Canadian Air Force. This pause was put in place as a safety precaution and resulted in a temporary cessation of flying operations on the Cyclone while we regroup as a team and work to assess and mitigate any potential risk associated with the operation of the aircraft. L'Aviation royale canadienne a mis sur pied une équipe d'experts de mon quartier général à Winnipeg et de la 12e escadre à Shearwater pour effectuer l'évaluation des risques. Cette évaluation est effectuée au moyen d'un processus que j'utilise pour comprendre le risque lui-même, déterminer comment il peut être atténué et ensuite décider d'accepter ou non ce risque avant de remettre la flotte en service. Ce processus est informé par l'information tirée de l'enquête en cours. Cette équipe vient de commencer ses travaux et par conséquent, elle n'a pas encore tiré aucune conclusion ni formulé de recommandation. Ainsi, la pause opérationnelle de la flotte d'hélicoptères CH-148 Cyclone demeure en vigueur pour le moment. As this important and time-tested process continues, I would urge us all to avoid speculation and to allow our skilled investigator teams to do their work to determine the cause of this tragic accident. Our rigorous airworthiness program is in place to ensure we operate as safely as possible in all aspects of military aviation here in Canada and around the world. Our team remains focused on one common objective, that is to do everything we can to reduce the risk of a similar occurrence in the future and hopefully prevent it altogether. Throughout this investigation and risk assessment process, we remain steadfast in our commitment to supporting the families of those we lost in this cyclone accident and keeping them informed, while ensuring the well-being of our collective Royal Canadian Air Force family. As we move towards a recovery operation, we are hopeful that additional findings will further allow us to round out our analysis and allow a safe return to flying operations in support of the Royal Canadian Navy. I will now turn it over to Vice Admiral Baines, the Maritime Component Commander.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the Royal Canadian Navy, I would also like to express my sincere condolences to the families, friends, and colleagues of those we lost. The planning and beginning steps of the Canadian Armed Forces search and recovery operation of our downed CH-148 Cyclone and its crew is now underway. As we speak, we have an 8-member Canadian team deployed to Italy who are conducting preparations for the at-sea search and recovery operation. Over the past several days, we've consulted with salvage specialists and our allies in order to determine the most rapidly executable search and recovery operation with a proven capability, which will provide us with the best opportunity to quickly find the remains of our fallen and our lost Cyclone helicopter. The Canadian Armed Forces will be assisted by the United States Navy, specifically members of their Naval Sea Systems Command, NAVSEA, and the Department of the Supervisor of Salvage and Diving. The USN offered us this option as both the fastest means of commencing the search, while at the same time using the same system to recover what we potentially discover. This is a proven USN capability that has been used dozens of times for search and recovery operations, which will allow us to transition quickly from the search phase to the recovery phase with the same remotely operated vehicle. This will avoid lengthy delays in transition between search and recovery. The search and recovery will use the USN's Remora Remotely Operated Vehicle, or ROV, with a flyaway deep ocean salvage system that integrates the ROV with the salvage vessel. The ROV is able to operate to a depth of 6,000 meters, twice the expected depth of where the Cyclone helicopter went down. The ROV will dive on the site from the EDT Hercules, an offshore multi-purpose support vessel, which will also be used as a platform for a potential deep-sea recovery. Une opération de récupération
en eau profonde de ce genre est toujours difficile, car on ne connaît pas avec certitude le variable avant d'avoir trouvé et inspecté le site. Cela dit, nous avons une très bonne idée du secteur où se trouvent les hélicoptères et nous utilisons des systèmes éprouvés pour la recherche et la récupération.
Understanding that the on-site search and recovery timing is a window. The estimated timeline for this operation is currently planned as follows. On the 20th of May, the Hercules will arrive in Suda Bay, Greece. At this point, the ROV and flyaway deep ocean salvage system will be integrated into the ship along with the Canadian and USN personnel that will support the salvage operation. We will have 5 Canadian Forces members on board, including 2 naval diving experts, 2 flight safety officers, and 1 medical officer.
Étant donné la complexité de ces systèmes, on estime que le navire aura besoin d'avoir 5 jours pour intégrer les équipements nécessaires.
If everything proceeds as scheduled, we are anticipating that the Hercules will depart Suda Bay on or about 25 May to transit to the search site. This transit will take approximately 26 hours. We have excellent positioning data on where the helicopter potentially is located. The underwater locator beacon, which allows us to zero in on the wreckage with a high degree of certainty, will also potentially assist with locating the helicopter or debris on the ocean floor. The search site is located in the Ionian Sea, approximately 220 nautical miles east of Catania, Sicily. Following this timeline, the search should commence within 24 hours of the vessel arriving on site. An operation of this nature is not without challenges, and factors like weather and sea state could cause delays. Our first priority is to recover our fallen, and our second priority is to recover what we can to assist in the flight safety investigation.
Compte tenu de ce que nous savons de l'emplacement de l'hélicoptère et selon l'expertise de nos alliés relative à des opérations de récupération semblables, nous prévoyons que les opérations prendront environ 5 jours. Il s'agit là d'un chiffre très approximatif, compte tenu de facteurs environnementaux et techniques que pourraient entrer en ligne de compte.
Upon completion of the recovery operation, Hercules will transit to Augusta Bay, Italy, in the vicinity of the Naval Air Station Sigonella. This transit is expected to take approximately 15 hours. Upon arrival, we will transition to preparing any recovered remains and equipment for transport back to Canada as soon as possible. I'm sure you can appreciate that this operation will be very challenging, primarily because there are several unknowns at this point. And it goes without saying that until our team is on site and the search begins, we cannot speculate on what they may or may not find or how long the operation will ultimately take. I have outlined the best case scenario for you, but as maritime professionals, we know that the environment has a big say on how this will unfold. Finally, it is important to note that we will ensure that the families are given regular updates as the operation progresses. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Merci, messieurs. We will now start the question and answer session on the recovery operation for Stalker 2-2. The operator will now allow the first question on the phone.
Thank you. Please press star 1 if you have a question. N'hésitez pas à appuyer sur étoile 1 pour toute question. Please press star 1 at this time if you have a question. La première question, the first question is from Lee Bertium, Canadian Press. Please go ahead. Your line is open. Votre ligne est ouverte.
Yes, thank you very much. Just very quickly around the circumstances prior to the crash. You mentioned a hoisting operation. Obviously, there's been reports of what has been referred to as a brownie run, kind of a photo trying to be taken. Can you speak to exactly what the helicopter was doing in the moments before this crash, understanding that the cause of the crash is still under investigation?
I'll address a couple of quick comments there, and then I'll hand over to Admiral Baines to amplify. Everything that we do with aircraft on operations is sanctioned. And so, per what General Peltier said, in terms of rumor and speculation, it would be important for people to perhaps wait for the facts to emerge. I can assure you that this helicopter was flying on a sanctioned mission. It was doing a maritime surveillance flying mission. And beyond that, I will ask Admiral Baines if he has anything.
Yeah, what I can confirm is a part of normal operations for a helicopter when it's returning to the ship is often to fly close by the ship, and we'll take photos of the ship, or the ship will take photos of the helicopter. This happens not on every trip, but certainly on many of them. And that certainly did occur in this case prior to the helicopter eventually attempting to return back to the ship for recovery and the hoist operation.
Okay, thank you. And can you, as a follow-up, in terms of the delivery schedule for the rest of the cyclones, understanding an operational pause is underway, we don't know what the cause is, has there been any assessment as to what impact all of this will have on the delivery of the other cyclones that haven't been delivered yet?
No, Lee. I mean, we're here to talk about the search and recovery mission. I'm not in a position, I don't have the expertise or the knowledge to speak to project delivery pieces. Those are held somewhere between the Air Force and our Assistant Deputy Minister Materiel, so I have nothing to offer you in that regard.
Nous allons maintenant prendre une deuxième question au téléphone.
Second question on the phone.
Thank you, merci. La prochaine question, the next question is from Murray Brewster, CBC News. Please go ahead, your line is open. Votre ligne est ouverte.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. I am looking to direct this question to Major General Pelletier. Can you tell us whether or not the Cyclone was under any flight restrictions before the crash took place, and what were they? Because you did mention a hoisting operation, and the Cyclone was at one point under restrictions as it related to hoisting operations. So can you outline for us what if any restrictions were on the aircraft at the time of the incident?
All right. To my knowledge, the aircraft had no specific restriction. The aircraft had just undergone maintenance in the last protocol. So the flight safety investigation team will actually analyze the maintenance that had taken place, if there was any minor maintenance deviation, as it occurs from time to time before the flight, which I'm not informed at this point, or I'm not aware at this point. So, but like I said, to my knowledge, not that I know, and the flight safety investigation will bring light in terms of any maintenance deviation that may have existed at the time of the flight.
And just a follow-up question that relates to the Block 2 upgrade for the Cyclones, which was ordered. There was a flight control software problem with the Cyclones, a glitch, as it was recorded, that prompted the 9-week grounding of the fleet prior to its introduction into service. Can you tell me whether or not Sikorsky has been able to confirm to you that that glitch has been fixed?
So, with regard to the previous issue with the flight control computer system, the issue was resolved throughout the operational and the technical airworthiness management of the fleet itself. And so this is an element that has been completed as part of a mitigation strategy to lift the operational restrictions of the previous incident.
And Murray, I would maybe just pile on to make a point about that, because I know there's been a bit of speculation in the media on that. You know, no leader in the Canadian Armed Forces would allow their soldiers, sailors, troopers to operate in unsafe equipment that was knowingly unsafe. Certainly that was not the case with the Cyclone. The Cyclone has flown operationally to very good effect for CJOC since July of 2018, since it was introduced for operational service. We have flown in excess of 2,200 hours operationally with this aircraft. There's a whole bunch of, I think about another 7,000 hours that were flown prior to that for the Air Force to certify it for operations. All of that said, something went tragically wrong on the 29th of April for that helicopter to go down. And so this is why the search and recovery mission that we're here to talk about today is so important. We need to find answers as to why this machine went down and why we lost 6 of our own. And that's exactly what we're going to do in the search and recovery. And I would point out that in that context, I like to think that these 6 did not die in vain, because what we learned from this accident will certainly help make flying operations with the Cyclone safer moving forward so that we prevent a recurrence.
The operator will now take the next question on the phone, please.
Thank you. Merci. Once again, please press star 1 on your téléphone keypad if you have a question. Vous n'hésitez pas à appuyer sur étoile 1 pour toute question. There is no question on the telephone line. Il n'y a aucune question sur les lignes téléphoniques. À vous la parole sur le plancher.
We will now take questions from the floor. Please identify yourself and prior to asking your questions. Nous vous prions de vous limiter à une question suivie d'une complémentaire et vous avez les micros de chaque côté pour poser votre question. Merci.
Good afternoon, Sarah Sears from CBC. Rear Admiral, you touched on this briefly about where the wreckage may be. How well do you know where it might be, and what conditions might it be in at this point?
Yeah, so because the helicopter went down fairly close to the ship, they had a very good positioning data on where it went down. And then, of course, because of the debris that they recovered, they had a really good initial search spot that they've obviously been able to record, and will be a place where they can start from when the salvage ship and the ROV arrives on scene. However, we do know it's been a number of days and weeks since the accident, and saltwater environment, as you can appreciate, is very unforgiving. And so for that reason, we are not expecting to be able to do any identification of any remains that we find downrange. And in fact, we fully expect that to be done if we discover remains when they're returned to Canada and certified through a coroner.
What does pressure at 3,000 meters do to the wreckage and the helicopter itself?
That's a really great question, and I'm not a subject matter expert in exactly what that does, but of course you're right. It's under extreme pressure. It's salt water. The good news, though, for us is that the salvage team that is doing this operation with our Canadian members has dozens of searches of this type under their belt. They're very familiar with this type of situation. And in fact, as recently as March of 2020, they were able to get photo evidence of a helicopter that had crashed in 5,700 meters of water, almost twice as deep as where our helicopter went down.
Question. We need the assistance of the United States Navy for this. Is this an example that the Canadian Navy needs more equipment, or is this just such a rare occurrence that this is an ally in a time of need?
Yeah, I mean, you can't have every capability in your armed forces. It's just simply not possible. And so we obviously invest where we think we need to the most wisely. And we do know that we have allies that in certain circumstances can help us out. And in fact, in this particular case, we have a pre-existing agreement with the United States Navy to be able to help us in a situation very much like this. And so, no, I do not think we need to invest in this particular capability.
Hi there, Rachel Haynes from CTV National News. You mentioned that the U.S. military is helping out with this investigation. What role are the Greek authorities or Italian authorities playing in this investigation?
So we've been dealing very closely with the Italian and the Greek authorities, and I would hasten to add that there was also Turkish ships that were proximate to the accident site who helped with the initial search. The countries in question, Greece and Italy, are enabling us to do what we need to do in as timely a way as we need to do it. And so things like overflight clearances, even nuancing some of the COVID restrictions so that we can have people certified and they can move bubble to bubble, if you will, once they land. Both countries are working very well with us to make sure that we do this as speedily as we can, while respecting the sort of regulations that they have in their country. So it's actually, the cooperation's been very good. And from an allied perspective, obviously the U.S. Navy has been tremendous as well.
Perfect. And you just mentioned that no one would ever allow anyone to operate in unsafe equipment. So following this tragedy and also the one that we just saw over the weekend with the snowbird, are you going to push for any kind of overall review of all of the Canadian planes that we have right now to make sure that everything is safe?
Well, this sort of thing happens continuously. Commanders at various levels are always kind of monitoring the holdings that they have and making sure that the things that we are operating are fit for purpose. And where we find that there are problems, we take action. It's not like we just let the problems manifest themselves and metastasize. There's been a couple of incidents in a couple of weeks. It's obviously been a very bad time. We will conduct the investigations. They will be thorough. They will have the time that they need to be done. And when we determine the findings and recommendations, we will advance those to the Chief of the Defence Staff. General Vance will take a holistic look from an armed forces perspective and make the decisions that we need to make in order to make sure that we're operating as effectively as we can.
And I'll just add an additional question as well. Given that these two tragedies happened so quickly in the last couple of weeks, are you concerned at all about how this might have a long-term impact on the recruitment of the Canadian Armed Forces if people see this, and perhaps what kind of reassurance can be done to make sure that Canadians know that this is a safe place to work?
Well, we are an armed force, and so there are inherent risks associated with belonging to the armed service of whatever country you join. And, those are the pragmatic realities of joining the military. That said, we are in the business of managing risk on a daily basis. It's something we do every day, every week. So while occurrences like this are rare, we take them obviously very seriously. We examine them extremely thoroughly, and we arrive at balanced decisions to be able to manage the risk envelope to try to achieve the missions that we're given by government.
And are you 100% confident right now that every piece of Canadian equipment, aircraft, everything that the Canadian Armed Forces are using right now is 100% safe to use?
Listen, we live in the real world. I mean, I can't stand here and say 100% across the board for everything. Obviously, we live in a world where some of the things that we have are brand new, and that brings certain challenges because you have to get familiar with that equipment. And some of the things that we have are mature in age, and that brings a different set of challenges. So it's not like we refurbish the military every 3 years or every 5 years. We have a rolling system of procurement, of maintenance, of operations and maintenance. And I'm very comfortable with the parts of the military that I am responsible to employ, which are pieces of the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force, that those pieces that are given to me are highly employable. But what's the magic behind this is not actually the equipment, it's the men and women who operate the equipment. And when you combine the people that we have with the hardware that we have, that's where the magic happens.
Just one more from me, I'm afraid. Murray's keen ear noticed you mentioned a beacon. Is it still operational? Are you still receiving data from that?
Yeah, so the nature of the beacon is actually, we won't know if it's still operating until we're on scene. So once the salvage vessel arrives and we put the ROV in the water, the ROV itself has something that can detect the beacon. So we'll know when that ROV actually gets put down, whether the beacon is still active or not. Yes, it's supposed to operate out to 30 days. So we anticipate that if all goes well with the marrying of the equipment and the team, by the time the salvage vessel gets out there, that the ULB could still be operating.
We will now go back on the phone, see if we have any additional questions.
Thank you. Merci. La prochaine question, the next question is from Ken Paul, Foundland Defense. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Given the fact that it took the U.S. Navy 15 or 16 months to recover the wreckage of a carrier-on-board delivery aircraft that crashed, albeit at double the depths that you're contemplating for the Cyclone, how long are you prepared to let this recovery mission go on before you say, and it sounds very callous, sorry folks, we can't do any more, we can't recover?
So this is not time-based. This is conditions-based. Now, in the planning that we've done, we have planned for multiple different contingencies of what we might find or what we might not find. What I will say is the Chief of the Defense Staff has given me complete latitude to be able to conduct this mission with no big constraints that would limit me. We need to get on scene, we need to see what we can see, and then make the appropriate decisions on that basis. What I can say, though, is that we're not going to rush out of there. We're going to be there until we're satisfied that we have collected everything that we can collect. And only at that time will I advise the Chief of the Defense Staff that we're prepared to terminate the mission, and on his authority, we would then terminate it.
A supplementary, if I may. Have the families been advised of this possibility?
So the Navy and the Air Force are the points of contact with the families. We are taking great care as an armed force to make sure that we're communicating proactively with the families before we communicate with you all in the media. And yes, we will continue to actively dialogue with the families so that they are intimately familiar with what our plans are and with how it progresses along the way. That is correct.
We will now take another question on the phone, please.
Thank you. Merci. La prochaine question, the next question is from Lee Bertium, the Canadian Press. Please go ahead. Your line is open. Votre ligne est ouverte.
Yes, sorry. Could you just clarify something? There's been a lot of questions about how close the helicopter was to Fredericton when it went down. I think Rear Admiral Baines said very close. Can you just quantify that for us?
Yeah, so what I can tell you is that the exact distance is going to be part of the flight safety investigation, and I'm not even privy to the exact distance. But what I can tell you is that it was within visual distance of the ship.
Okay. And you mentioned that you are prepared to send a replacement helicopter once the operational pause is over. What are you doing in terms of mitigating the operational impact of not having those helicopters? Well, first of all, is there an operational impact? And if there is, how are you mitigating that at this moment?
So our ships are designed to be able to operate both on their own and with helicopters. And certainly when they have a helicopter, that only adds to their capability in almost all areas of warfare. But the ships are completely capable of operating without a helicopter. So right now, the Fredericton, who's proceeding to join Standing NATO Maritime Group 1, will be able to carry out that operation without a helicopter. But if the operational pause is lifted and we do end up sending one downrange, that will just add to her capability.
Nous allons maintenant prendre la prochaine question au téléphone, s'il vous plaît.
Next question on the phone.
Merci. Thank you. De nouveau, n'hésitez pas à appuyer sur étoile 1 pour toute question. Once again, please press star 1 on your telephone keypad if you have a question. We have the next question is from David Pourlier from Ottawa Citizen newspaper. Please go ahead. Your line is open. Votre ligne est ouverte.
Thank you. I was wondering, since the recovery of the ROV seems to be focusing on the area where the helicopter went down, is there an assumption that the crew is still strapped into their positions in the helicopter?
David, we don't know that. We simply don't know. We were fortunate enough to find Sub-Lieutenant Abigail Cobra on the surface during the initial search. We found partial remains that were later identified as belonging to Captain McDonald. We simply have no further information beyond that, Dave, and we're going to have to get over top of the scene, go down, and see what we can see and make decisions from there.
Supplementary question. So you know the rough area where the helicopter went down. Have you located it yet, or is that what the ROV is going to do? Find it more precisely.
That's exactly right, David. We know very precisely where the helicopter contacted the surface of the Ionian Sea. After that, it's all based on speculative planning until such time as we can actually get down. Now, there are a lot of subject matter experts who are involved in predictive analysis of this sort of thing, but it's only when we put the ROV down that we're going to know what we can see.
Great. Thank you.
Nous allons maintenant prendre une autre question au téléphone. Merci.
Another question on the phone.
Thank you. Merci. La prochaine question, next question is from Bruce Campion-Smith from Toronto Star. Please go ahead. Your line is open. Votre ligne est ouverte.
Thanks for this. Can you just describe somewhat the wreckage that has been found, and I guess the wreckage that you're missing? I don't know if you presume that the cabin, like the main aircraft cabin, is missing, and therefore the body's in it. But if you just maybe talk a bit to that point.
Good. So very little is known at this point. I can tell you that what we did recover was the flight data recorder, as well as the cockpit voice recorder memory module, which is located in the tail of the Cyclone. There were other parts, but those elements were actually tabulated by the flight safety investigation team, and I've not been purview to the detailed report at this point of what has been recovered. We know that the main element of the airframe is still missing, but we don't know if it's intact or not at this point.
And I guess maybe just some clarification around kind of the final minutes of the helicopter. So I understand it had come past the ship in a photo run of some sort, and then was circling around to the rear, and it was at some distance, and that's where the impact happened. And as well, I guess, given it was a photo run, do you know if you have video or photo evidence of the actual crash?
So we have nothing to offer, Bruce, beyond what was already explained. Everything in relation to what we might have access to, what the witnesses might have seen, were there pictures taken, we don't know that right now, and we shouldn't know that. The incident happened, we searched, immediately a flight safety investigation has been initiated, and that's held at arm's length from the chain of command for a lot of good reasons. Principally to protect the integrity of that independent investigation and not be prejudiced by anything from the chain of command. So right now, the Directorate of Flight Safety, Colonel Alexander, and his team are looking at all of that, and we simply have nothing more to tell you until the first update that Major General Peltier spoke of a little bit earlier. Does that make sense, Bruce?
Yep, thank you.
We will now go back to the room for questions. Any other questions from the floor?
I was just hoping to follow up a little bit about what David was asking about a photo run. I thought that was in his question, but can you just tell me a little bit about what the exercise, why they were out there as part of the, and we know it's a training mission, but specifically what were they doing in the Cyclone that day before the crash happened?
So I'll just say a few words up front and then ask Admiral Baines if he has anything to add. It would be important that we not focus on this, two-word photo run. That's not language that we use. That's colloquial language that's been introduced by others. This helicopter took off from the ship to conduct a maritime surveillance operation. It had been in the air for, I believe, several hours and was returning to the ship. And so I wouldn't want to leave you with the notion that it took off to go and do a photo run. That was not the case. It was doing a maritime surveillance operation, and in that context, there were two members of the ship's company, the two sub-lieutenants, who were on board as part of the familiarization thing, and perhaps I could just ask Admiral Baines to just explain kind of why that is the case.
Yeah, thanks, sir. So as the General said, the helicopter was doing a maritime surveillance operation working with Standing NATO Maritime Group 2 and the other ships that were out there in addition to the Fredericton, which included an Italian and a Turkish ship. And that mission was really to be able to pass information back and forth between the helicopter and the ships so that they have a good understanding of what is in their vicinity. And it's a very normal mission for the helicopter. And as part of that, two sub-lieutenants from the ship under the commanding officer's authority were on the helicopter to become familiar with helicopter operations. As you can appreciate, having a helicopter on board the ship is really important, and it's also important that the folks that work on the ship understand how the helicopters work, what their missions are, so that they can better use them when they're on the ship. And so that's why the sub-lieutenants were on board.
Okay, and if I may, I'll bring in the aviator perspective to this. First of all, the Cyclone has been designed to actually support the Royal Canadian Navy in a number of missions. One of them is pretty much surface surveillance. The other one is subsurface surveillance. We also employ it in the utility role to actually move people around from one ship to the other, and into the search and rescue role as well. So in this case, the maritime helicopter, the Cyclone, was actually supporting the warship in the surface surveillance role. Any aircraft that actually comes back to after its mission to the airfield will follow a certain pattern depending on the type of aircraft. In this case, the maritime helicopter was returning to the airfield. The warship is the maritime helicopter airfield. So the helicopter was returning to the field, did the standard, what we would call a downwind approach, like beam the ship and then repositioning at the back in order to actually do the hoist, and then followed by a landing. So that's just a standard approach. People quantify with regard to speed and altitude. I want to also bring the precision that the maritime helicopter working environment is exactly there in the low-level environment. It's able to hoist up and down elements in support of the mission that I just mentioned, and that will be done in the low-level environment as well. So I just wanted to actually bring a little bit more to the context of the environment.
And I'm wondering if you can confirm if the possible causes of this accident are restricted to the Cyclone fleet. Has Sikorsky notified operators of the S-92, the civilian model, to any possible problems?
Okay, I'm not going to speak on behalf of the company. The CH-148 Cyclone is a very different machine than the S-92. It's not only a militarized version of the helicopter, it's had a number of components, including its mission system, that is the kit that we brought on board of the helicopter to actually support the Royal Canadian Navy in its multitude of missions. And so because of that, I see this as being a CH-148 Cyclone accident. I will leave it up to the company to actually explain the difference and how whatever is found through our flight safety investigation team and through their rigorous process, what will be the resulting impact on the cousin fleet, if I could call it that way, of the S-92.
We will now go back on the phone for a few more questions.
Thank you. Merci. The next question, la prochaine question is from Ken Paul, Farmland Defense. Please go ahead. Your line is open. Votre ligne est ouverte.
Hello again. One quick question. Can you describe what the sea state was at the time of the operation and the crash?
Yes, it was actually fairly good conditions. The only complication after the helicopter incident was that it was very close to sunset. And so as the ship was doing that initial search for survivors, it was becoming more and more complicated as they lost light around that time of day.
Thank you.
Nous avons maintenant le temps pour deux autres questions au téléphone.
We have time for two more questions on the phone.
Thank you. Merci. Once again, please press *1 on your telephone keypad if you have a question. De nouveau, n'hésitez pas à appuyer sur étoile 1 pour toute question. We do not have any question registered on the phone. Nous n'avons plus de questions enregistrées sur le téléphone. Back to the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes today's announcement. Thank you very much for attending. Mesdames et messieurs, ceci conclut cette annonce. Merci d'avoir assisté à notre événement.
Thank you for attending.